You'll be surprised to learn that a woman who heals people is actually accused of witchcraft. What if you found out that a blue bottle emerging from the bottom of the lake held secrets that could change destiny? Would you dare to look inside? What would you attribute this woman's struggle for survival to? The love of the people, or that blue bottle rising from the darkness of the lake? Biddy Early's story awaits you on that fine line between kindness and fear. On Kilbarron's rocky shore, the wind played an ominous melody, whipping the branches of the trees, while the coolness of the night and a gloomy tension enveloped the lake. The salty, muddy smell of the air mingled with the damp stones of the shore. A faint scent of seaweed and the salt of distant sea foam hung in the air. The moon cast its pale light through the clouds onto the lake's surface, rippling the water like a firefly, filtering through its hair and transforming it into sparkling waves. At that very moment, a small, bright, deep blue sparkle fell toward the shore. An object like glass floated lightly on the water and then silently sank into the darkness of the water. The few people gathered there looked at each other, their eyes filled with both curiosity and fear. Whispers were carried by the wind, becoming even more frightening in the silence of the night. "I found the bottle," said one in a trembling voice, reaching out as if toward the empty space above the water. The other nodded silently. The third brought his hand to his lips and remained silent, unable to tear his eyes away from the point where the blue light had disappeared. "So Biddy's work isn't done yet," muttered an old man, casting a shaky glance toward the lake. "As you can see, this is either a sign or a curse. Who knows, maybe it's a secret that will change the course of our destiny." The wind carried the words away, scattering them among the piles of rocks, while the water slowly swallowed the blue light and plunged the night into even deeper darkness. That blue bottle was, to some, a simple object from the sea. To others, it was a burden that would fundamentally change human lives, a harbinger of an unknown fate. A few people sitting on the rocks looked at each other in silence, trying to fully comprehend what they had witnessed. The silent call from the depths of the lake continued to shake the night and their souls. Bridget, or Biddy, was standing in the kitchen as a little girl, holding a bunch of dried sage in front of her mother. Steam was rising from the kettle on the stove. The smell of cloves and lime water mingled in the steam. Her mother took her daughter's hand in an authoritative but gentle voice and said, "Look at your hands, Bridget. Just as every person has different fingerprints, their skin also has a different language. If you know how to look, you will understand how to speak." "But how will I learn that?" asked little Bridget, her lips chapped, her eyes full of curiosity. Her mother took a piece of oat and crushed it lightly, then gave it to her daughter. "When you feel the bitterness of the herb, you will know what ailment it cures." Little Bridget grimaced when she first tasted that bitter flavor on her tongue, but then she bit her lip and said, "I felt it, Mom." At that moment, the lines on her mother's hands etched themselves into Bridget's memory. The world had taught her to talk to plants. Years later, Bridget now Biddy opened the door of her cottage wide. Inside, it was filled with the smoke of wood, the strange sweet smell of meat cooking in the oven, the sharp scent of dried herbs. A woman stood at the door, exhausted, shivering, clutching a tattered blanket tightly. "My daughter's fever won't break, Mrs. Early," she said, her voice muffled as if stifled by a scream. Biddy pulled up a stool and looked at the woman. Her hands were rough and dirty, dirt and soil under her fingernails. "Bring the child," she said curtly. "Warm milk, a pinch of sage, and a little mint. If the fever doesn't break, you must come back at midnight." The woman wiped her tears. "I have no money, but I have a blanket." Biddy drew a smile on her face with her hand. "Take it. I can't leave you naked," she whispered. As the days passed, Biddy's customers grew in number. There were often long lines at her door, sometimes a child, sometimes an animal, sometimes people suffering from pain. As those people explained their problems, Biddy would sometimes mix a few herbs, murmur a few words under her breath, or simply think quietly before finding the right herb and giving it to her customer. The essence of this work, according to Biddy, was not words. It was the intention of the touch. One Saturday morning, the priest came to Biddy's door, adjusting the hem of his robe. His shoes were muddy. "Biddy Early," he said, his voice deep and cold, "you are guilty of deceiving the people and conspiring with the devil." He raised his voice. Biddy opened the door a little wider, and a mist-like smoke rose from the boiling herbs outside. Biddy said, "Priest, I am a remedy for people's troubles. Whoever I helped got better. I never did anyone any harm. Before you accuse me, you should find a way to cure the wounded." The priest's lips formed a single line, his eyes glaring with anger. At that moment, several young villagers passed by with loud laughter and chatter. Just then, the priest's horse neighed in fear and ran away. It was running towards a small stream bed that descended from the church road. Suddenly, its foot slipped and it got stuck in the ground. As the horse neighed in pain, the metallic sound of its hooves competed with the faint roar of the water. The priest panicked and tried to free his horse, but it wouldn't budge. Biddy couldn't remain silent at this sight and stepped forward, her eyes shining with cold determination. She raised her hand toward the horse, and a few murmurs escaped her lips. It was neither a prayer nor a spell. Even the villagers couldn't quite understand what it was. The wind began to whisper in a completely different tone. The surface of the water suddenly calmed. After a few seconds, the horse leapt backward as if its reins had snapped. The priest whispered in fear and astonishment, How is this possible?" One evening, a young man from the other side of the village came to Biddy's door with a bright blue glass in his hand. His hands trembling, he whispered, "I found this in the lake," he said. "They say that when Biddy looks into it, she sees the truth." Biddy took the bottle from the young man's hand. The glass was cold, its interior empty as light, but there was a thin, shiny scratch on it. The hollow inside was like a darkness that sucked everything in. Biddy closed her eyes. At that moment, the logs in the fireplace crackled. The plates on the kitchen table trembled slightly. An image flashed through Biddy's mind. A young woman, a decorated cradle, a distant road. Then a murmur reached her ears. The pained breath of a sick person, and then a scream. Biddy slowly opened her eyes and said to the young man, "Go back, and come back and tell me every detail you see." The man bit his lip and nodded. Days passed, and this blue bottle sometimes brightened the memories of the villagers. Other times, it only revealed their fears. Some looked at the bottle and saw the turning points in their lives. Others saw only their loneliness. The stories surrounding the bottle both fueled and troubled Biddy's fame over time. Some who passed through Biddy's door paid more than a debt of gratitude. One day, she promised the man she had healed. That man later proposed to Biddy. "You gave me life," he said one night as the candlelight reflected on the walls. Then these words came from his lips, "No matter what happens, I will be by your side." The villagers watched in astonishment. Some asked, "What is that young man doing?" While others said, "He's chasing a delusion." This marriage brought both strength and scandal to Biddy's life. On one hand, people came to her for healing, while on the other, the church's gloomy gaze was upon her. Some condemned her, some defended her. Some admired her women's freedom. This heated debate hung over every neighborhood like the village's laundry. The church administrator always wore an expression somewhere between anger and hatred. One evening, the priest sent church officials to Biddy's house. As soon as Biddy stepped out of her cottage, the church officials surrounded her. "This woman's influence is growing. She is leading the people. We must stop this." Biddy took her rosary out of her pocket and ran her fingers over the pebbled surface of the beads. It was unclear whether she was praying, but everyone knew she was devout. "I am a woman who prays," she said quietly, as if it were a ritual. "Don't blame the people who come and stand beside me. You are the cause of their fear." She raised her voice. The priest fixed his gaze on Biddy. "You don't come to church?" Biddy shrugged. "I come my own way," she replied. This pair created tension in the village like two polar magnets. The rift between church authority and the local needs of the people was growing. When Biddy's faith and the church's message failed to meet at a common point, the villagers began to act as if they were divided into two camps. One night, the dim yellow light coming from the cabin window magnified the shadow play outside. Inside, on the table, were beer bottles, a small pot, and a few cards left over from a game. People were laughing, crying, whispering, settling scores. A child's mother had sunken eyes, the lower lids purple. He placed his hand on Biddy's. "You gave us hope," he said. Biddy nodded and took a sip of tea. The wood crackled, and the sharp, bitter smell of whiskey from the bottle filled the air. Even when the wind outside finally died down, the mysterious tales inside the cottage continued. People began arriving from increasingly distant places, from beyond the seas. Each time they came, they left behind a hope or a rumor. This exchange both empowered Biddy and made her a target. Because when power became visible in the eyes of the village, it was also seen as a threat. Suddenly, Biddy whispered, "If you ever want to know the truth about me," she said sadly, looking at one of the young people standing in the arena, "and then come to my cottage. Bring your story. We'll listen, and maybe we'll share something." This sentence was both an invitation and a gentle call to keep the story alive. The hum of the church bells spread through Kilbarron's narrow streets with the first light of morning. That day, the villagers were quieter, because a truth they knew would be revealed to them today. That day, the priest would set out for Biddy's cottage. When Biddy's door was knocked on, the smell of herbs in the cauldron was overwhelming. The crackling wood in the stove cast dancing shadows on the walls. The priest said in a stern voice, "Bridget Connors, I'm warning you. Stop messing with people's minds." Biddy slowly raised her eyes. She still held her rosary beads, turning them slowly between her fingers. Her voice was calm. "I'm not confusing anyone's minds. I'm just giving them what I know. What's the difference between your sermon and my herbs?" The words reached the village square. The crowd waiting behind the door had stopped whispering. Some villagers called it a sign from God. Others claimed that the single word that came from Biddy's lips had freed the priest's horse. So which would you believe? A divine miracle or a woman's mysterious power? Another night, as fog enveloped the shores of Kilbarron Lake, Biddy's blue bottle began to be talked about again. It was said that when she held the bottle in her hand, her eyes deepened, and she could see the past and future of the person in front of her. One peasant woman recounted, "Biddy told me my child would die before birth. I didn't believe her at the time, but her words came true like a nightmare." Another told a different story. "She told me I would experience great happiness and wealth in the future. Now I have grandchildren in my arms." Maybe she was right. Rumors about the bottle's reality grew. Some saw it as the devil's terrible work, while others made it their only hope. And the day came when the priest took the bottle from Biddy and threw it into the dark, deep waters of Kilbarron Lake. This glass bottle, lost among the waves, left a question that would echo forever in the village's memory. If you had found that bottle, would you have dared to look inside? Biddy's life was not just about the blue glass bottle or her conflict with the priests. Her personal choices also shook the community. Her marriages to young men shattered the narrow confines of society. Each marriage drew a little more attention from the church. One afternoon, sitting in her cottage, She is said to have turned to her young husband and said, "They accuse me of witchcraft, but you know I only want to heal." The man fell silent because he too felt the weight of the village gossip on his shoulders. Time passed and Biddy grew old, but her name did not diminish. On the contrary, it grew even larger. The village children would shiver when they saw the light shining from her cabin window at night. Women would rush to her in labor pains. Men would knock on her door when their animals fell ill. When she died, she left behind not just an old, humble cottage. What remained was a huge debate, contradictions and whispers etched into the memory of a people. Who was Biddy Early? Was she a healer, an ancient sage who knew the secrets of nature? Or was she a witch who had sold her soul to darkness, as the church had branded her with fear? Perhaps she was both, or neither, a woman who had chosen her own path. Today, that cottage, destroyed by time, has been rebuilt. Among the stones and planks, not just a structure but a memory, a legend, has been revived. Every year on May nights, fires burn by the lake, the sound of violins mingles with the wind, and old tales are whispered to New Year's. Tourists come, strangers fall silent as if spellbound. But most of all, the villagers tell the stories. Memories passed down from generation to generation, memories no one can quite forget. How would you describe Biddy Early? A wise woman? A woman who embodies the wisdom of nature. A healer? A healer who is the last resort for the hopeless. A witch? Both feared and desired, the embodiment of mystery and forbidden knowledge. Why does Biddy's story still enchant people? Perhaps because we see our own shadows in the contradictions of the past, our fears, our hopes, our losses, and our longings. While we want to believe in miracles, we still fear the unknown. Biddy's name still echoes at this breaking point. So, what do you think? Was Biddy Early really just a healer? Or was she someone feared and misunderstood by those around her? If so, don't we realize how often wisdom and courage are still misunderstood today? And the most important question, if you had lived in her village, would you have sought her guidance? Or would you have joined the fearful crowd that shunned her? Think about it. These questions not only help us understand Biddy's mysterious life, they also make us question our own courage and our view of what is different. Now it's your turn. Which legendary witch story would you like us to explore in the next video? Agnes Sampson, a Scottish healer accused of threatening the royal family with her powers. Mother Shipton, an English witch whose prophecies still intrigue historians. Tigaba, the woman who made the first confession at the Salem witch trials, sparking panic and fear. Each left behind stories full of mystery, tragedy, and lessons. Share in the comments which story you want us to bring to life. On the shores of Loch Kilbarron, the waves still whisper the same question. Is that blue bottle really at the bottom of the lake? Or is it still in someone's hands, waiting for midnight to whisper its secrets to the brave? Perhaps only those whose hearts are open to both darkness and light can hear the answer. The secret of the glass bottle still dances with the wind, hiding a little more with each wave, calling a little more. And if you listen, you've already begun to hear the whispers of the next story. If these dark but meaningful stories have caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and turn on notifications. Until our next meeting in the Whispers of Legends,